Growing up, I felt different, but I never knew why. Hot, cold, up, down, left, right, emotions all over the place. A repetitive cycle. I need answers. I visit GPs, counsellors, then a diagnosis. Borderline personality disorder. I seek help. Doctor's office to doctor's office. Clinic to clinic. They have differing opinions. They could have just been having a bad day, or maybe they just don't have the knowledge. I just want to know why, and for others as well as me to understand how I feel. Imagine waking up in the morning and already knowing the day has got you beat. It's draining feeling so much. I wish I could just switch it off. I may push you away, but I just want to be loved. I don't want you to leave. Forget what you've heard and forget what you've seen. They feel I'm attention seeking. I'm not. I'm just trying to get my needs met. It's time to flip the script, get equipped. Emcee Brodz. Don't you know that you hurt me with those words? Too scared to speak of my emotional pain. I feel insane when my illness just puts me to shame. Am I to blame when relationships go down the drain? I'm scared that you will leave, but I want you to stay. Don't want to tell you about it, I don't know what you'd say. If you treat me different, that's the stigma at play. Makes me not want to face the world most days. It's time to hit you with some truth, it's time to be brave. It's time to flip the script, get equipped. And the hurt, yes you hurt. Don't you know that you hurt me with those words? It's time to flip the script, get equipped. And the hurt, yes you hurt. Don't you know that you hurt me with those words? I'm trying my best and I hope it's enough. I'm no good at talking about my feelings and stuff. I know learning comes slow and I'm still in a rush. I just wanna be better for the people I love. I'm not calculating, I'm just misunderstood. I'm not attention seeking, it really hurts that you could. You're thinking my intentions are nothing but pure. Your judgments I hope I never have to endure. It's time to flip the script, get equipped. And the hurt, yes you hurt. Don't you know that you hurt me with those words? It's time to flip the script, get equipped. And the hurt, yes you hurt. Don't you know that you hurt me with those words? It's time to flip the script, get equipped. And the hurt, yes you hurt. Don't you know that you hurt me with those words? It's time to flip the script, get equipped. And the hurt, yes you hurt. Don't you know that you hurt me with those words? It's time to flip the script, get equipped. And the hurt, yes you hurt. Don't you know that you hurt me with those words? It's time to flip the script, get equipped. And the hurt, yes you hurt. Don't you know that you hurt me with those words? Thank you.
Thanks very much, Brodie. That was great. Brodie wrote that for BPD Awareness Week, and his contribution, I think, is worth the applause that you just gave him, and you'll give him another one in a moment. But it also introduces for us nicely the range of experiences that people with BPD have. So whether you're a consumer, a carer, or a clinician, it's a great way to introduce a session like this. So thank you very much, Brodie. That's great.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name's Tony Greenrod. I'm here as a MC and also as a carer representative for my daughter with BPD. And I'd like to welcome you all to this session very much. It's great that we have a session for men who have this condition, because many of them are unable to be here. They're otherwise being engaged. But also to acknowledge the country. I have a formal acknowledgement of country where we are at the moment. So I'd like to do that if I may. Respectfully, the country whose it traditionally was, in the spirit of reconciliation, the Australian BPD Foundation acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to the elders past and present and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders peoples of today. So that is a genuine for people thank you, for a genuine respect for country there. Could you hear me okay at the back, George? Going back to whichever group you represent, you know that BPD is a tough gig. And for the people that are here today, we will share our thoughts and our emotions in a respectful way, whichever, the things that we may hear from questions and so on, I know that you will treat that with the respect that it deserves and not add to the pain of people. If you do feel uncomfortable by something that is said, just if you could indicate, we've got people here who are well equipped to talk to you, to hopefully to make you feel a bit more comfortable. So if you could just maybe indicate and move to the door, someone that will be able to help you. What else have we got here? There's an error. We're not speaking on behalf of any specific groups here. We're not speaking specifically for LGBTQI groups or people of colour either. It's more of a generic male perspective than those specifics. And there's an error on the flyer that you may have noticed regarding Sharon Bax. She isn't a clinician. And therefore, if you have any questions to Sharon, do you like to? That's Sharon. When the time comes, there's no need to ask. She'll tell you who she is, but she isn't a clinical clinician. They can be directed to Kimberley. She is a clinician. In fact, while I'm doing this is so much fun. This chap here is Aaron Farino, and the gentleman on the other side of Kimberley, this side of Kimberley, is Jake Hodgman, and they'll tell you all about themselves in a moment. The format is going to be shortly, basically a presentation Q&A, and so on. So you'll be able to listen to some interesting perspectives and then ask the questions that you may have. And I think we're already there. Questions, yep, did that. And thanks to all of the people that put this together. This, if you look around here, this doesn't just happen. And there's some brave and hard-working little soldiers that have worked very hard to make this what it is. Next year, it will be bigger, but it's what they have done. So a big hand for them, and another big hand for Brodie, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you. Well, that's enough from me. So unless, Karen, did you? Just say something about it. Yep, here we go.
Is this the slide thing? Okay, that's our event. And as Tony just said, that's our thank you to all the people. There's quite a lot of organisations that helped us put this together. So obviously Alea Function Centre and Orama, Mel McDowell and the IT department. Subway have donated some of our food, so we're very grateful to that. And of course we've got Sanctuary represented and the Australian BPD Foundation. So it's the SA branch that have put this together for you today, and hopefully it's going to go around Australia too, because we know it's being recorded and it will be up on our website. So I just wanted to share with you a bit about BPD Awareness Week. So this happens every year, and we normally would have a conference as well in a different state around Australia, but this year, because of COVID, a lot of it's online. So you can check out a lot of the stuff that's online on our website, which is bpdawarenessweek.com.au. And this is just a couple of snapshots taken from our website. So this year our focus is flip the script, changing the narrative on BPD. So what we're trying to do is encourage everybody to think and speak about BPD differently, to use different language, because language can be so stigmatising, and also not only from other people but also from ourselves, you know, that voice in our head that talks about how we are. So a lot of our materials this year are designed for that. And we've got 2 poster packs that you can download online. They're our posters that you can see lined around on the back walls there. And we've also got freebies. So take some with you, pop them up at your workplace or your doctor's clinic or at home just to remind yourself. They're great examples of words to use instead of saying, for instance, manipulative. There's lots of different words there that you can use in your speech and in your report writing and anywhere else. And we also on our website have got lived experience stories. So this is a collection of stories that have been, they're not really long stories, they're just tips and insights into different people's experiences of BPD. Many of them are people who live with BPD and some of them are carers as well. We also have artworks online as well that people have contributed. And this was our lineup for BPD Awareness Week this year, and our event here today is wrapping up. And so we've had a few face-to-face events in those states that weren't restricted too much by COVID, and all the rest were online, and they will all be uploaded to our website, and you can see them there, bpdfoundation.org.au and bpdawarenessweek.com.au. And there's also a couple of email addresses there. But all that information will be on the flyers, and I've also got information about the BPD Foundation, and you can join that. That is free, and you'll get lots of information, updated Australian research, and so we love to share that with you. And so, thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Just 2 other points from me. One is, you've probably already done it, but if you could turn your phone down to, down the volume down of your phone, your ringtone. And also to say that the presentations from the speakers are timed to go through to 1 o'clock. And then there will be food and refreshments will be served that you're free to enjoy, and also to talk and network and ask specific questions to any of the speakers who will be there. And the whole event is due to finish at 2. So that's it from me. Any questions of anything that I haven't covered or that Karen hasn't? Okay, well, I think the first thing to do, or the next thing to do, is to introduce Aaron, who will tell you something of his remarkable story. Yep. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you, Tony. Can you hear me? Yes, I think it's working. Okay, so my name is Aaron. I was diagnosed with borderline personality disorder when I was 13 years old. Yes, what ensued was a long period of hospital admissions, various different types of medication. So people with BPD are often what I call put on a medication trifecta, which is your antidepressant, an antipsychotic, and a mood stabiliser. Which is crazy in itself, as no other psychiatric disorder receives that much medication. But anyway, I was thrown on all this medication, and it was really difficult. The periods in hospital, I felt quite safe, but when I was out in the real world, I didn't, and I wanted to go back to hospital. So a lot of this stuff ensued with repeated admissions, rejections, by psychiatrists saying there was nothing wrong, you're fine, you're just being silly, you're attention seeking, you're manipulative. And that was really hard to take as a teenager, particularly when I hit 17 and I was in government care and I was discharged as a ward of the state, and they turned around and said, you're probably going to be in hospital for the rest of your life, in and out of hospital for the rest of your life. You're going to be on different sorts of medication. You're never really going to have a good relationship. You probably won't be able to work. And that was really difficult. It was quite crushing to hear that as a 17-year-old. And I grew up quite angry and resentful at that, particularly towards mental health services. Some of what I'll touch on today will cover emergency service workers and mental health teams, but how I dealt with that. I'm currently a final year law student, so I've been studying at Flinders. So it just goes to show I can study and demonstrate. I've held the same job for the last 8 years. I work for the South Australian government. I won't say in what area because you'll throw stuff at me. But I've been doing the best I can. I've got a daughter. She's 11. Her name's Violet. I love her to bits. I see her every second weekend. I share care with my ex-wife. Relationships are still up and down, but that's the least of my worries at the moment. So, yes, mental health teams and emergency service workers. I used to get really bitter and angry towards emergency service workers. And in part that was because of the BPD, but also in part it was because I was never really listened to or taken seriously. And what I found was, with my interactions with these services, I never really identified that for that point in time, police, ambulance, whatever, they saw me for like, I don't know, an hour or two at best. And I never fully appreciated that they actually didn't see me when I was going well and when I was functioning. And that sort of changed my opinion or narrative on these services. It's that they saw me at the worst of my worst. And it's not really fair for me to turn around and go, well, you guys don't know what you're doing, you're a load of crap. They were trying their best to cope with me in really difficult situations, and I think that's very easy to forget as someone with BPD, that you do have people who do care, and it doesn't feel like it at times. And interacting with these sorts of staff members can be quite demeaning. And don't get me wrong, I think there's some out there who use, still to date, very discriminatory language and stigmatising language, and that can just... If you try to pick a fight with a person with BPD when they're in a rage, you're going to lose. I promise you, you'll lose. The best thing you can do is to try and walk away and come back and discuss things a bit better. But that doesn't always happen in hospital emergency departments. So, yes, the periods I was in hospital, I tried to get as much help as I could, but it was like a Band-Aid. Every time I was discharged, it got worse. And it wasn't until I hit about 27 that I started taking the disorder a bit more seriously. Because of how it was talked about and treated when I was younger, I didn't want to identify with having it. I wanted to have schizophrenia or bipolar because there's medications you can take for that and there's something that can fix it. And that was really troubling because the medications I was taking weren't having really much of an effect. They'd turn me into a zombie, and I'd speak very slowly. And not only that, medications would have a really bad effect on me, just generally. They did not like me for whatever reason. So I decided one day to stop taking medication, that because it wasn't working for me and because I was having some really bad side effects from them. I sort of said to myself, my emotions are going to be more intense. I've got nothing to numb them anymore, but at least I'm still going to be interactive. Now, that's not dismissing anyone who does take medication. Medication can work for some people. It just didn't for me. So, yes. I started getting, just to jump a bit more, I did DBT treatment, which is dialectical behavioural therapy. And that really helped me improve my mood and how I viewed my outlook on life. It gave me a lot of stability. But nevertheless, DBT is quite difficult to get into. You're put on a waiting list that's a long, long time. And quite recently, I actually I wrote an article for SBS Insight, which has been published online. So if you go to their website and look in the articles, you'll see me give my account of BPD as a teenager, and especially telehealth services, which continue to receive a lot of funding, but they're quite useless to people with BPD because often there's a disclaimer through a variety of services. I won't name them, but I'm sure you're aware of them. They're promoted heavily enough. But there's a disclaimer which turns around and says, well, look, if you're going to harm yourself, we're going to disclose this to emergency services or police or whatever. So paradoxically, that prevents you from calling those services. There's not much help in that sense. You can't call telehealth services, but they receive a lot of funding. That's not saying they do a bad job, but they're just completely useless to a person with BPD because you're worried about the police turning up at your doorstep. So I tried to highlight that in this article, and I was really proud of getting that published. It wasn't easy. Media in particular are quite funny about mental health. And what concerned me was the narrative they were using is very discriminatory, or they'll use it in a context of some sort of criminal offending. So you'll see X person kills their family and has a diagnosis of BPD. That's about as much context as you're given when a horrible crime is committed. And as a law student, I find that fascinating because it really, I can see how stigmatising it can look to some people. just sort of wrapping this up, but a lot of things that helped me were different little things and different ways of understanding what I was going through bit by bit. I tried to stop looking at everything all at once, because if you look at everything all at once with BPD, you get really overwhelmed. And it's hard to make any sense of it if you're looking at, I want to change this, I want to change that, I want to change this, I want to change that, and you're trying to fix too many things at once. What I tried to do is I tried to focus and hone in on one thing at a time. So things that mattered to me were a job. I needed a job. I needed to work, which means I need to interact with people, which I'm horrible at doing. Not so much anymore, but I was at the time when I was going through this. But my stepping stone was first getting a job. And when I did, I was over the moon. I'm like, I've got to continue with this and I've got to keep going. It was initially retail, and retail didn't work out for me. But my point is that I tried to get into another section, which I did quite successfully. And that was a traineeship in the South Australian Parliament. And I studied a business administration certificate, and I graduated from that, and I took that seriously, and then I got my job where I currently am, and I've just been there for 8 years, and I've kept trying. But that was the whole foot in the door for me. I found with work, like having a job, you focus your mind on something else, and that was really important. It's really easy to sit around when you've got this condition and feel, I wouldn't say feel sorry for yourself, but you just feel like you're in a rut, a constant rut, and it's never-ending thoughts that intrude. But if you've got a job, that can take you away from that. And that's what helped me. My music was a huge thing as well. Bands like 9 Inch Nails, they were really cathartic to me and just spoke to me in volumes that no other person could. And the lyrical content is really, I'll say, probably upsetting to some people. They find it violent, offensive, whatever. And that's fine. Everyone can interpret music differently, but my point is that for some people who are going through a really bad time, that's the best music that they can listen to, because it's speaking volumes to them when they're having trouble discussing their feelings with people. I've seen 9 Inch Nails 5 times and they're fantastic. But it wasn't just that. I had a supportive family. I still do have a supportive family. I didn't see it at the time. When I was going through a lot of my BPD stuff, it was like they weren't there. Like, I just felt shut off, and I couldn't talk to my mother. Things were always offensive to her. They never made sense. My brother and sister I never got along with because I couldn't identify with them. I couldn't identify with anyone. But nevertheless, we managed to reunite, I guess, and we keep in touch constantly now. We're all fantastic. So this didn't all happen overnight. There was a lot of back and forth, and there is with BPD. You'll make 2 steps forward and then take 4 steps back, and then you keep going back and forth until you start moving forward. But you do progress, and I think that's what needs to be emphasised on, is that there is progression that can be seen if you need to be kind to yourself if you've got this condition. It's difficult, it really is. And you see a lot of different attitudes towards it and a lot of conflicting opinions. But yeah, I try to advocate now because I was just tired of seeing all the stigma and whatnot. And I do give talks like this, and I do go out and do things for people. I co-run a BPD Facebook group. And I try to make people or help people feel less alone, because there's no way I'd want anyone to feel as alone as I did when I was a teenager. It was absolutely awful. I thought I was the only person in the world with BPD, because you're not. It's such a stigmatised disorder. No one talks about it, and you hear of kids that have gone off the rails and you're like, what's wrong with them? But no one really discusses what is wrong, and I think that's a bit of a problem, that we really do need to change the narrative on BPD. We need to discuss it a bit more openly, because I've seen how far depression and anxiety have come in the general community, and we can all talk about depression and anxiety and everyone knows what it is, and that's great. But more complex mental health issues like BPD, they're still quite not there yet, and that's what I'd like to see change. So thank you for listening to me. Of course, yeah, I'll be around if you want to ask any questions personally, but yeah, we'll have a Q&A session. So thank you.
I gave you a bum steer. I thought that we'd be doing questions straight away, but it will be at the end of it. So the questions that I'm sure you have for Aaron, remember them and come back to them. I'll try and remember mine too. Thanks, Sharon. That's very great. That's very good. And now we have Sharon, I think. We in escape. Is that all right? Yeah. You did it. Teamwork. Yeah.
Hello everyone, can you hear me? And if I start to go quiet, just because I can drop my voice. I'd really like to thank you for asking me to come here today, and as has been mentioned a couple of times, I'm not a clinician. I was one once, but I'm no longer employed in that field. And my role is actually... Just get that mic a bit closer to you. How's that? Is that better? Okay. I'm here to talk about the work that I'm involved in part of my job, which is I work for the South Australian Prison Health Service. And my role is around consumer engagement. So I'm just going to hopefully... first of all, what I'd like to do is acknowledge and respect the traditional custodians whose ancestral lands the Central Adelaide Local Health Network provides service on. So I work for the Central Adelaide Local Health Network, and our area is quite broad. And I also want to acknowledge the deep feelings and attachment and relationship of Aboriginal people and Torres Strait Islander people to this country. So some of the things that I'm going to cover today is about some background information on prison health service. Nothing's going to be very, greatly in depth. Some data on the life experiences and mental health of people in prison, and that comes from the Australian Institute Health and Welfare. They do a survey of people in prison. And also what we're doing to engage and involve consumers in their care and the service. And it's actually really, really important to hear from consumers of all the services that we provide about their experience of care, and we're hearing that today, which is actually very important. And I'm responsible across the service for looking at consumer engagement projects. So why is it that actually consumer engagement is really, really important and engaging people in their healthcare plans? That's because we know that people have a better patient experience, we know that there is improved patient satisfaction, and we know that there can be better clinical outcomes. So, prison health services, I won't read all this through because it's up there really, but there are 6 state-managed prisons in South Australia, and we also work in partnership with a number of people, which is forensic mental health services, Aboriginal health services, dental health services, drug and alcohol services, and sexual health services. It's important to say that the Department for Corrections in South Australia they are responsible for the prisons and providing, and we work in collaboration with them. There's been quite a lot of work done internationally at looking at and understanding the voices of people in prisons. And there's been a big report that's done by Healthcare Improvement Scotland, and they wrote a report called A Voice in a Tough Place. And this voice talks about some of the challenges that are involved in delivering healthcare in prison environment, where people's liberty has been restricted, and that there are a range of other considerations that apply in the custodial environment that wouldn't apply in the broader health services and also in community health services. And so you do need to take those things into consideration. If you're interested in the work around that, that's actually a really very good report to read. So what do we know about people who are in prison? Well, they can experience a number of vulnerabilities, which I've included here: social economic disadvantage, social isolation, complex health issues, general health, mental health, living with disabilities, substance abuse, premature ageing, literacy and numeracy issues. And I just wanted to talk briefly for a moment about the literacy and numeracy issues, because you'll see that there's a couple of posters that I'll show you. One of the things that we do in engaging with consumers is that when we develop posters and information sheets for people in prison, we go and talk to them and ask them whether these are easy to understand, if we need to improvement, if the messages are there, because we're aware that there are varying levels of literacy and numeracy issues. This is from the Australian Institute of Health Welfare, and it's the health of Australia's prisons at a glance. One of the things that I want to add into that, which is noted in the 2018 report on the health of Australia's prisoners, is that women are more likely to report than men a history of a mental health condition, which is 65% of women compared to 36% of men. I also want to acknowledge that taking medication for a mental health condition, 40% of women rather than 21% of men. That's actually just really important to know. And some of the things, because that's probably far too small to say, but one of the things that's useful to look at is that 1 in 5 people who enter prison had a parent who'd also been in prison. It's also 2 in 3 people had a Medicare card available on release of prison. These things are important in terms of managing people's healthcare as they move through the prison system. So here again is the Australian healthcare data on the health of Australian prisoners. And one of the things that we talk about is that mental health is fundamental to emotional, psychological and social well-being and affects individuals, families and the wider community. We know that 2 in 5 prison entrants, 40%, and prison dischargees, 37%, have reported a previous diagnosis of a mental health condition, including alcohol and other drugs. This data is readily available, so I won't go through it all now. But there is some research, and this is where we start to talk about consumer engagement, partnering with people with their care, providing opportunities for the consumer voice. There was a big piece of work that was done by the NHS and the Department of Health in the UK in 2010. They looked at all the research that was available around consumer participation, engaging people in their care, pulled it all together and wrote this report. And so I guess, again, if you're interested in this area of work, that's a really important piece of work. One of the things that they talk about, which I've written up here, is that they looked at people's experience of care and clinical effectiveness. And what they talked about is that people do appreciate and they very much care about the clinical effectiveness and safety of the care that they're providing. But quite clearly, and as you hear today and in other areas, people want to feel informed. They want to feel supported. They want to be listened to so they can make meaningful decisions about their care and that they can be heard again and regularly heard so that they're actually treated like a person, that their experiences are heard and people understand what it is that they're talking about. And that certainly guides the work of something that I'm now going to just talk about, which is the National Safety and Quality Health Standards Partnering with Consumers. SA Health Services, we're accredited against these standards. And the intention of this specific standard is that we actually have consumers who are engaged as partners in planning, delivering, designing, evaluating care, and that people are partners in their own care to the extent that they choose to. And I think that's actually a really important thing. So what have we done over the time that I've been in post, because it was a new role? We did a survey where we went to all the prisons and we asked people a number of questions about their experience of the healthcare services that they received. We had 267 consumers across the sites who participated in that, so it's quite a significant survey. And of that, 91% of responders identified as male. It's important to note that of the 6 prisons that are in South Australia, there is 1 dedicated prison for women. Some of the things that came from that is, and this is actually talking about pathology responses, is that we wanted to make sure that people knew when they were going to get their results and knew how they could ask for their results and knew what time that they could get their results from pathology tests. And this came out from the survey. And what we found is that we developed this stuff and then we actually went back again to consumers and say, okay, you've told us this. You've said it's actually really important to have this information. We've developed this. They made suggestions and then we've had it published and now that is available in the health services. One of the other things that we've done is about consumer escalation of care. And Let me just find my note here. So when we talk about consumer escalation of care, SA Health has a "you're worried, we're listening." If any of you go to any of the hospitals around the state, you might see that there's signs up there saying, are you worried about the person that you're visiting? Are you worried about the person that you're caring for? This is what you do. What we knew in prisons was that actually the person who they might share the cell with would know how they're travelling. They see them daily. And so we've set up a project where we involve consumers, we involve consumer advocates, and we involve staff, and we did a lot of work about how we can inform people who share cells that if they're worried about the mental or physical health of someone that they share a cell with, that this is actually the process they can do. So you'll keep hearing me saying, they let us know, we went to talk to them, we developed something up, we went back and asked them if this would work. And so that's the work that we've been doing. The other thing is, you might have seen happy or not machines when you go to a service station, like on the run. They're a point-in-time feedback opportunity, and we didn't have anything like that in the prison health services. So we trialled one, and we put it in our health services, and we asked the same questions, 4 of them, across the health services. We had an incredibly positive response because this is a good point-in-time survey, good opportunity for people to say what they're talking about. You can see that our response rates went from 296 to 171, and that we had a 76 to 96% satisfaction rate for the questions that we asked people. And the questions that we asked people were standardised questions, but also questions that came from the survey. Again, what we've then done with that information is to go back and look at some of the new initiatives. Oh, that's not very easy to read. So the other piece of work that we've done that involved a student as well on our committee is that we engaged in a lived experience project, because what we wanted to do was to increase our understanding of how consumers can share their story and their experiences. We had a short-term working group, and we talked about what are some of the things that we can do? What are some of the consumer mechanisms that we can do? Recognising the environment that we work in and asking people for their feedback on their experience of care in a custodial setting. So we've finished that piece of work. We're going to go and talk to consumers and ask them how we can do it. And then what we have is a way forward of how to progress, which involves how is it that we can incorporate the lived experience of people who are in prison into the services that we provide. So that's just really a snapshot. It is a snapshot of some of the work that we do. And questions are later. Thank you very much.
And you can just imagine the complexity of trying to help people in a prison environment on the physical and mental health, what that must be like across all those various sites. So the big challenge there, I'm sure. We look forward to the questions. Jake, hello. Over to Jake. He will tell you more.
Hello. There we go. All right. Hey everyone, I'm Jake. Jake Hodgman. That's my mum over there who greeted you all as you came in the door. Some of you have been to previous BPD things, might have seen us around, heard our story. Basically, I was a little shit, and it's a bit more complicated than that. Mum was a little shit too at times, but we were estranged for 8 years. I never thought I'd see my parents again. I attempted suicide. I hit a really dark spot, and then built myself back up to the point where, without me knowing it, Mum had actually gone and quit her job and changed her whole life to find out what this thing called BPD was. Went and studied and has become part of family groups that work to get mental health services in South Australia. It was work that directly led to the funding of BPD Co. And $70 million towards mental health from politicians a few years back. So, yay, Mum. Consequently, I mean, Mum asked me how I got through it without, doing DBT or MBT or CBT or whatever BT, all those behavioural therapies. I basically hit rock bottom and had to hit where the only way was up for me, and I had to make a decision that that's what I wanted to be down the track, and slowly make one thing better each day. And it was baby steps. It's not beating yourself up for yesterday's baby step going wrong, but it's making an effort to be a slightly better person today than I was yesterday, even if that's getting out of bed at 10 instead of 10:01 or something like that. Every little step helps. So I was asked to be on the panel, and then they completely forgot to tell me I had 10 minutes to talk. So I've just made a few little notes, I guess focusing a little bit on it being on a male thing. I often hear that, it's a female-dominated disorder. No. Women report more, women talk about things more, men are told to be strong and be silent and be, tough footy jock and all that kind of stuff when you're young, especially if you're in a country town. So we have these stereotypes that don't help. Telling kids to, grow up, be a man kind of thing sets the wrong example of what being a man actually is. For the record, I grew up with mum in Mount Gambier, younger brother and sister. Dad moved out when I was 7, and mum raised us from there. So I do come from a female-dominated background. But I think there are, I say that just maybe, I've had more of a female role model in terms. I was never out in the shed with my dad building a car. Dad doesn't know how to, but it was more things around the home, and I was the first person in my year level to do a course called Family Living and Childcare, and I knew all about trimesters of pregnancy in year 11. I guess it's about what you might call a sort of feminine side to it, men being in touch with your feminine side. It's more just being in touch with yourself and realising what works for you and what doesn't, and how you can be the better bloke. Often the better bloke isn't the one who's standing up there ready to throw a punch. They're the one grabbing your arm and saying, mate, it's not worth it, let's go home. So try not to label. I'm not sure where you're all heading, where you're all from, whether you're going to clinicians or study or you've lived experience yourself. So feel free to hone in on specifics in the questions if you want. What I thought I might just cover a couple of things that helped me day to day. One is that my face sometimes isn't doing what I think it's doing. So I might think I'm sort of, inquisitive or whatever, and someone's going, why are you so angry? That took me a long time to get over, and realise that sometimes when I look at someone and they react in a way that I didn't think quite added up, I might just go and have a look in the mirror, or I might think, well, how am I standing? Right, I do have my arms folded and my chest out and I'm being really aggressive. And you just store that away. So next time, if I'm feeling like this, okay, hang on, all right, relax, shoulders down, arms back. They're not your enemy. So it's being aware that you aren't often how you present. Sometimes you can present too well, and that held up my diagnosis for years, was that I was intelligent, I was out there holding down jobs most of the time. And people thought, well, can't be anything wrong with Jake. He's just got depression or something. So it took a GP a while to get through that and say, stop pretending when you come to me. Stop trying to be strong. That was a big change. One that has helped me with mum, and I think this helps in whatever role you have in life, is that there's this thing I call the wave. And what often happens is you'll see someone building up with BPD or just stress or something else, and things are just getting harder and harder, and this big wave's approaching, and it's about to crash on them, and you can tell that they're terrified of this thing crashing on them. What people do is they go, yeah, okay, I'm not going to be part of that. You go and be over there, and then the wave just crashes on them and they're wrecked. The way to look at it is, no, hang on, I'm going to hold your hands and we're going to go under the wave, and if the wave knocks us around, then we're going to be in this together. And I've had this where I've been managing my BPD for years, but just earlier this year, Mum picked me up and we went to go to Marion Shopping Centre to get some clothes or shoes or something, and I'm hopeless at making decisions on the fly like that, so I was a little bit stressed. And we got in the car, got halfway down Shepherd's Hill Road, and I can't remember which one of us said it, but it was basically, well, this isn't working, this isn't going to work. So I think Mum pulled over and just went, maybe I'll just drop you home. And I said, just wait 2 minutes. And I just waited 2 minutes, and Mum just shut up and just gave me my time. And 2 minutes later, this had all calmed down. And I was like, okay, all right, so we're going to go to the shops. I need to get this, and we'll back off. 2 years ago, it would have been, fuck off, Mum, I'm going home. In fact, I'm not even going to drive me home. I'm going to get out. I'm going to walk miles home on my own now because I feel shitty. So that's me looking at a wave and saying, can you just hold my hand while we go under this? Or it's Mum saying, hey, look, I think I can see a wave coming. Can I hold your hand? And my mates know enough about me now that they can see if I need a hug. And they'll come and offer one. If I'm getting really worked up, I've got mates who, dude, you all right? Come here, give us a hug. And that can be the complete opposite of the way the world treats you. The judicial system will often treat a guy as the abuser as soon as you walk into the room. Well, you're the man, that's the woman, you're obviously the bad guy here. It's unfortunate, it's sad, but it does happen, and so then you become angry at the judicial system, who are then the ones dealing with you. And if you're talking about going into a prison environment and it repeating and recidivist, recurring activity, well, yeah, if you don't get any help in that cycle, you are trapped in a constantly abusing cycle. So yeah, the criminal psychology side on that would be fascinating. The other thing I'll mention that I work in media production, video and audio and stuff like that, and we're making some videos coming up. Mitcham Council gave us some money to make a video, and one of the ways we want to do it is we want to let clinicians and scientists and researchers go away and talk in your pages of text and your big fancy words and all of that. Our role is to try and communicate it to the layperson. So the person who's working as a mechanic in his shed or something, and I don't know, this fancy school learning stuff, mate, I don't want that. But you need some way to get through to them and explain that, put it in a way that they can understand. So one thing that has helped me, and that we're going to try and create visually, is that if you look at the amygdala is slightly shrunken and oversensitive. That's right. And was the pituitary gland is overactive? Yeah, okay. So you got these two bits of your body working against it. One way to look at it is that you've got an accelerator, your amygdala, which is your emotional response. And, normal people can drive, but occasionally our accelerator will go and get stuck on like that, okay? And we've gone from this to, screaming down the road. So your first reaction there is everyone goes, put the bloody brakes on. Well, okay, so we're pumping the brakes, which is your pituitary gland over here, and it's going, yeah, mate, nah. Yeah, I don't know. Meanwhile, you're hurtling towards a tree, panicking. Everyone's screaming at you to get out of the car. So we look at taking this person with BPD is driving a car into a car park, and you're just trying to park this car in a garage. And you've got the mate who's the carer, or person around the person with lived experiences, looking at them saying, okay, we're going to take the car. I want you to drive the car into there. Then we go inside and we have dinner. And okay, yep, I can do that. Because the person in charge of the car is not at fault for how the car is built. Okay, they're the driver. They've gotten into this car, been told, put this car over here. So they get in. The first thing they do is they put their foot on the accelerator, and it slams straight towards the person who's trying to care for them. And they're like, whoa! And a lot of the typical reaction will be, you tried to kill me, I'm out of here, park the bloody car on your own. All right? Not helpful. So then the carer, they go, okay, well, all right, so I see what happened there. Something went wrong. Let's try this again. And you can see where it's going. You just gradually try and ease in. Firstly, every attempt just gets a bit better and better. Okay, so let's work together. I know the accelerator is going to lurch, so I'm going to stand over here. And then when it happens, to put the brake on a bit earlier, and we can come in and eventually park the car nice and neat, and you've done it together, and you go inside and do whatever you want to do. But it's a visual that you can get across the accelerator and the brake that anyone will understand. So in whichever roles you're going into, maybe just take that on board. Drop all the stereotypes of, angry, young, blah, blah, blah. Look at it as, how do my emotional responses work? And we all know what it's like to arc up. Someone says the wrong thing and bam, we're there. Well, BPD people are just living with that most of the time and trying to manage that. So I think I'll leave it there. Cheers.
Thanks very much, Jake. That was very instructive. The accelerated break. I'm sure we'd be able to all take that away and readily apply it. Rather than going straight into Kimberley's talk now, we're going to take a 5-10 minute break just to get up and stretch your legs. Okay, we're ready to for our next speaker, Kimberley from BPD Co, and look forward to hearing what she has to tell us, and then we'll have our Q&A. So, Kimberley, if you would be so kind.
Thank you very much. And first of all, I'd just like to express my gratitude for being invited to speak today, but also to push myself outside of my comfort zone. And I would also briefly like to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today. So I come from a background in forensic psychology. I worked for the Department for Correctional Services for the last 10 years, up until about 3 months ago when I joined the BPD Collaborative. So just briefly about BPD Co, it's a super exciting place to work. So we fall under the Department for South Australian Health, and all of my colleagues have such a wealth of experience in working with people with BPD, and sometimes it's quite intimidating. We have up to 12 clinicians. We're a few short at the moment, and they include social workers, OTs, nurses, psychologists, psychiatrists, and a whole bunch of other people who work from behind the scenes away from consumers as well. And our mission is to promote change amongst the existing health services through education, training, support, collaboration, new initiatives, and through clinical work as well. So we deliver training, support services. We are trying to implement new crisis intervention services, and we also run a 10 and a 12-week program where we support consumers who come to us. And I actually was saying to Jake just before that we have a program called Roadmaps program, which falls very nicely in line with that, sensitive accelerator and slightly not great brake. And so we have our program is kind of based on this whole premise of let's look at the car and how we can work this car that we've got to steer it in the right direction. So yeah, it's that analogy, it's in motion. So I feel like maybe what I would also like to and part of what we do as well is we have a really strong consumer engagement and co-production emphasis, and so this week we've actually announced that we are offering opportunities for co-creation and collaboration with consumers to come up with a program specifically for men with BPD. So if anybody's interested, let me know during the break, otherwise you can send us an email or give us a call. So just briefly, we do all these things, but we also are trying to come at it from a really strong research and evidence base. So we can look at what we're doing, evaluate it, seeing if it's effective, and make sure we're doing the right thing in the right areas to boost and promote the services for people with BPD. And we're doing that with support of a lot of university students, actually. So my role exists for a number of reasons, but one of the reasons is that there is an acknowledgement that BPD is overrepresented in the offender population. So my role at BPD Co is focused on the criminal justice system. So having come from corrections, they picked me because I know the system relatively well. I've had quite a few different roles in corrections, and my job is to implement significant change in the correctional system, which is huge, by the way. So I come from the Department for Correctional Services, which is big, but on top of that, we're also looking at youth justice, forensic mental health services, both in the community and in the prison system, for adults and for youths, and the courts and all the other services that link in with the criminal justice system as well. So yay me. So the first phase of my job, where I'm trying to head, is to really boost training and support for the 9 prisons across the state. So we're going to try and offer some support and training to prison officers, who are the people that work with offenders day to day. They're there through all the ups and downs. They're often the first responders to crises, and they are often the people who have the least mental health training in the system. So we would like to offer some support to learn more about trauma-informed care, trauma-informed responses. And then beyond that, we also want to support and upskill and capacity build as well all of the people who come from a mental health background. So your psychologists, your nursing staff, your social workers, Aboriginal liaison officers, and all of those people who wrap around and support people when they come to us with mental health needs. The second phase, we're not quite sure just yet what that's looking like, but from my perspective, what I would like to look at is how we can intervene at earlier stages, because what we know is that men, especially with BPD, are overrepresented in prison, and I would like to find a way to promote a better understanding of BPD and a better understanding of the common trajectory of what happens with men with BPD to systems like the courts and to youth justice. So we can look at how we can intervene earlier, so we can divert people away from prison rather than trying to help people when they're already in prison. And also one area that's probably lacking in general as well is working with offenders who are on remand, because most of the time when people are, when men and women are remanded to prison, they are not offered opportunities to attend programs and things like that. So if we can find ways to support mental health while people are waiting for their court processes, sometimes those people are released, and we've got a perfect opportunity to provide support then. So, coming back to my time in corrections, I ran a DBT program at the women's prison for just over 2 years, and we had, that was probably my favourite part of working in corrections. I thoroughly enjoyed it, and we saw some really promising results in terms of reducing reoffending, like really promising. And beyond that, I provided some crisis intervention and helped people who are at risk of suicide and self-harm. And the last chunk of my time was dedicated to working and running violent offender programs. So that was a really interesting point in time, because we had an opportunity to work with men for quite a long period of time, sometimes around 10 months. And this was often working with men who had never had support from mental health services before. I often came across men who had never received a diagnosis before, and then when you talk about BPD, they're like, "Oh my God, that sounds right." I'm like, great, okay, let's do something. Let's talk about this more. And then, what I also saw was people who, like Aaron said, over-medicated, the wrong medications, talking to people who are like, I feel really foggy all the time because I'm on all these medications and none of them seem to be working. And, the difficulty in prison is often that there isn't a lot of opportunity to access doctors and psychiatrists and people who can help understand and, maybe alter, problems that might be going on with medications. So in working with these men who came to me for, 10 months at a time, the priority was obviously to work on things that kept people reoffending. But often the case was mental health caused a desire to use drugs and other substances, and that kind of perpetuated this cycle of offending. And we talked maybe for the first time with a lot of men about thoughts and feelings and behaviours and how those things all link together, and it wasn't uncommon for people to kind of go, feelings, what's that? I don't really know what that's about. Come from this really masculine environment where, my dad was in jail and his dad was in jail, and we don't do feelings. That's not for me. And, breaking down some of those misconceptions about what are feelings and, hey, guess what? You've got some, let's talk about what they are, was actually really quite important and powerful for a lot of people. So, the programs that I had run in prison had a real strong emphasis around mindfulness, emotion regulation, talking about what emotions are, some distress tolerance skills. And so what was heartening was that we were introducing basically DBT skills in a program setting that was focused on offending, but also seemed to have a really positive effect on general well-being. And for people who didn't have identifiable mental illnesses, they were still coming out of it with like, oh, this mindfulness stuff, yeah, that's cool. All right, I can maybe try some of that. And one of the things that I think I found to be probably the most relevant to the most number of people was this concept of wise mind, and that for most of the time I'm going along perfectly okay, but then something happens, and then suddenly I'm kind of switching off to this other part of my brain. So this part's not working properly, and this concept of wise mind and the emotional mind taking over at times was really quite validating to some people who had found that they were offending in the context of heightened emotions. So I suppose what Sharon had kind of said, in fact, probably what everybody's kind of said along the way, there's a lot of overlap, and I'm not going to, rehash over things, but, one of the thoughts I had in thinking about men with BPD in prison is that, when a person in the community is struggling with thoughts of self-harm or suicide, they are often able to turn to a service, and perhaps maybe that service might be able to support them. In prison, if you report thoughts of wanting to harm yourself, you are often met with a very punitive response in that you might be put into an isolation cell, and you might even be put into a canvas smock so that you can't hang yourself. And the response in the prison environment is understandably one that is worried about duty of care and keeping people safe, but at the same time it also can have a very invalidating and traumatic response to the person who is already feeling quite upset and quite at risk. Sitting with that discomfort, I remember when I first came into the prison environment, it was quite an uncomfortable notion to be saying, but hang on, we're doing what? We're doing what in response to these urges and these thoughts? And it sits uncomfortably, I suppose. And that's not to say that the intention is to harm people more, but it is also a difficult situation to be in when you're at a low point in your life, I would imagine. I suppose when I think of, the differences between male and female prisoners and offenders, with BPD in particular, what I had noticed in my time in working with people is that often men were more likely to act with aggressive behaviours than self-harming behaviours when they were experiencing a difficult time. And I suppose one example of that was a client of mine who was so upset that he repeatedly beat himself until his face was quite black and blue, because he was trying his best just to manage through that distress. And yeah, I suppose, I imagine there's probably a lot of differences between male and female offenders, but were you about to say something?
I was just going to pick up on a couple little bits you said. The idea that the men are more aggressive is easily thrust towards men with BPD.
I agree.
But it's actually
Not the case.
Well, it's actually every man has testosterone in that. So I've rung up for help when I've been absolute worst spot and I needed to be really vulnerable and ring up for help. And I rang ISIS, and then the cops turned up at the door and threw me to the ground, and all this kind of stuff. And that was an hour 45 after I'd made the call.
Wow.
And they threw me to the ground saying, well, you're a risk to yourself. And I'm like, mate, it's been an hour 45. Like, I'd be dead if I was going to be dead.
Yeah.
And so then, matter of process, they sign you up on a mental health treatment thing, bring you to a hospital, this one, put you in the emergency department where they go, I don't know what to do, put you in a room for 8 hours with a security guard and treat you like a criminal. And then we wonder why men get angry and repeat, but it's because when they reach out for help, a lot of the time what they get is, you're a criminal. We're not saying that.
There's
but
a
we're
breach
going
of
to treat you
trust.
that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think both of you have kind of mentioned this masculinity thing, and I certainly would say that I feel like I've witnessed that in that society kind of doesn't necessarily accept men talking about feelings as readily as it accepts women talking about feelings, and yet it's almost socially acceptable for men to be aggressive and to act with violence compared to women. And so, when we see these behaviours, it's kind of like, oh, well, that's okay because that's men just being boys and things like that. These are the messages that we hear as in society, and I think that maybe perpetrates some of the differences between how we see men and women with BPD. These are my thoughts, by the way, and I haven't certainly reflected on all of the evidence behind this when I came to speak today, but I do recognise that I think the diagnosis is experienced very differently for men for some of those reasons. I think I might leave it at that because it sounds like we've probably at a really good spot to start chatting. Is that okay?
I think so. I have to stand here so that the people at home can hear. That was terrific. Very insightful and interesting that you were talking about there, Kimberley. Thank you. But we are now at that position where we can open it up to Q&A. So questions that you have. We've heard some of the terrible stories here of the problems of BPD diagnosis, treatment, access to skilled help. And when you consider that the numbers of people in South Australia estimate is 68,000, the upper limit by SA Health, and I think it's a range of 15,000 to 68,000, so that's the level of accuracy. And then half of those are male, reasonable to assume. I had some questions to all of the panel, but we're going to run out of time. But to our two gentlemen, the theme of this year's week was flipping the script, and I wonder, in your interior monologue, the voices in your head before you were diagnosed or before you got to where you are now, what were some of the worst of your self-talk to yourselves? And what have you switched that to now? How do you see yourself in now as an identity? If you've got any of those.
Mine in particular was on feelings. When I was 14, I used to tell myself, I don't have feelings. Feelings are for stupid people. And I genuinely believed that. Over time, I developed that belief that I'm a wall. You can't break me. I don't have feelings. Feelings are dumb. it took me a good decade to reverse that sort of thinking, and it wasn't easy, and it was really difficult to say, hang on, no, I do have feelings. I may not like them, I may get distressed by them, but nevertheless I still do have feelings. And I think that's what triggered a lot of my repeated admissions, is just this utter denial that I wouldn't allow myself to feel anything. I wanted to end my life so much that I shut off from everyone and everything, and that was hard. But yeah, a decade later, and I've managed to not only accept my feelings but enjoy them as well. I think there's a lot of emphasis on the negativity with BPD and the emotional tsunami, but it's also easily forgotten the pleasures and how pleasure can be over amplified and really enjoyable. But it's very easy to focus on the negatives. So yeah, that's my
Thanks,
2
Sharon.
cents.
Jake, and we've got a couple of minutes left. We've got to do a wrap up and a thank you.
Okay.
So, good.
Well, just in terms of flipping the script, what we're hearing today, a lot of problems, can't get into GPs, can't get a diagnosis, all of these things. Okay, so that's the script you're working with. We're only here today because a bunch of people and some families who'd lost their children had enough that they went, we are sick of the script as it is. The same script is telling you can't get a diagnosis and you can't find the right person, you can't get any help. So if no one else is going to be a disruptor and change it and flip the system, do what these people did and take another direction. If what you're doing now isn't working, do something else. Go prepared to your GP with the 9 diagnostic criteria of BPD, knowing that you can exhibit them at the time. Don't protect yourself when you go in there. If you need to be vulnerable in order to get that diagnosis, be vulnerable. If you have to cry in the middle of the road in order to get their attention because someone is just going BPD doesn't exist, make them rethink what they're doing, because they're the problem then. Flip the script around so that you're prepared, you've got the power, and when someone asks you, what can I do, you can say this or this or this. And the other part about what I used to think and simple thing I've changed now is I used to think I can't do that. I can't be a man, I can't own a house, I can't learn this skill, I can't do that, I'm not good enough. Add yet to the end of that. I can't do that yet. 4 years ago, I couldn't play a musical instrument until someone handed me a ukulele and said, come along for 4 weeks, and if you don't like it, I'll give you your money back. All right? 4 years later, I'm on 5 ukuleles. I run the biggest ukulele festival in the state, and I'm in like 3 different uke groups. So that's the other little thing. If you need something to distract you, Brodie's done it. Aaron's done it too. We've all tapped into music in some way. So there's a therapeutic thing, Dana, as well. Yeah. So I'm not even going to get it out, but my uke is here with me. I take my uke almost everywhere, and if I find myself in a garden with 2 minutes to spare, I'll go out and I'll do it, because 2 minutes a day is better than the 2 minutes I didn't do yesterday.
Thank you, mate. Thank you. We're probably going to lose in the next few moments, if we haven't already, our audience out there online. So thank you for your presence, those people that I'm looking at the mic. But thank you for joining us, and hope all goes well with you. We will carry on here now. But before, if you're still there, a huge hand to Dana, who helped to pull this together, but there's more of that to come for our live audience. There's another question that's been asked to me to ask to you, Jake and Aaron, and that is, what as men, what are the biggest barriers that do you think are out there which prevent men from accessing help?
Ability. To access help, there has to be help put forward, and this is another point that I articulated in that article that I wrote, was that telehealth services don't work. I know I said that before, but there's not really much of a substitute between that. So nevertheless, it's not really an excuse to sit back and go, oh, well, there's nothing, I can't access anything, there's no point. Research it yourself. Find credible sources of information and research it yourself. I did that a bit later on when I started to accept that I had BPD a bit more. Is I looked for my own my own way to challenge my own beliefs, and a lot of that came from neuroimaging studies that showed that BPD is legitimate illness, and that the biology of it, as Jake was saying earlier, the car analogy, that was very powerful because it made me feel like what I wasn't feeling was completely stupid. It was well recognised, and that there are others interested in this area and researching on it. So that was a huge thing for me. But you can research it yourself. You can learn DBT skills up to a point, I think. There's all sorts of different apps now on phones and whatnot that you can download and try and use. But I think in terms of accessing DBT, get your name put on a wait list. Go through the horrible rigours of trying to get a diagnosis if you can. Try and enrol in DBT programs. I'm not sure the current status of community mental health and your ability to access those treatment programs if you don't have a diagnosis, but you can still try at least. So, yeah.
Just on that point, DBT is one of the therapies, evidence-based therapies, that's often mentioned, and you've heard it today. But there are others as well that are equally held in high regard: mentalization, schema therapy, and others. You'll find that different psychiatrists specialise in different therapies. But DBT is the one that BPD Co is generally going, that's the emphasis in South Australia at the moment. But the other offerings are expanding. Jake, did you have barriers that you foresee or know of?
I could wax lyrical about society's problems for ages, but I won't. I think it's probably, I don't know, it's probably a sense of community, or communities that aren't as strong as they could be. It takes a village to raise a child, but do we then abandon them when they're an adult? We all need community. We all need empathy. We're not taught empathy at school. We're not taught compassion. We're taught things that don't necessarily apply as much. Well, I don't think are as important. If we all had these skills coming out of school, if we all knew the signs to look for and say, oh, Sharon, I noticed such and such about you today. You don't normally do that. Can I buy you a coffee afterwards? And Sharon recognises that that's not judgmental or anything. It's just yeah, sure. You might have seen something I haven't. Let's go have coffee, have a chat. Turns out we're fine. But we've checked up on each other. Women tend to do that more than men, and I think that culture of men having to be islands and rocks and sturdy and all that is bullshit and damaging. So good on the blokes who've turned up today, because, well, 10 years ago this would have all been women. No, it wouldn't have been running 10 years ago, but it's great to see men coming out, because every man who comes out is a support for people like Aaron and myself as well, rather than being the only men in the room.
This is another quick point, is the way gender has actually destroyed a lot of treatment options and just views on BPD. Why have gender? That's my question. Why? How does it assist anyone by saying you're a female, you're 75% more likely to get diagnosed? How is that beneficial, especially to the men? In fact, I found it had an opposite effect, as you feel like less of a man, because you're being compared to what's perceived as feminist traits, and you're sensitive, and that's not for men.
So you've got a problem with feelings, so don't talk about your feelings. No.
Yeah, I think a closing comment for me on this, at least, is the emphasis on individuality in our society. You have to make it by yourself, and that the level of breakdown of community, as the fellas were saying there. So the individuals who are then trying to seek help in a very large set of systems, it makes it difficult to find an access point. It makes it difficult to find appropriate help, and it's all on you to find that. And I think maybe COVID is going to possibly give us an opportunity to find some connections with people, either online or in person. But that ability to network and seek support from friends and family to help us through tough times. Maybe that would be an unintended consequence of it. I think we're probably there. So we can carry on the Q&A with the delicious food back there. But before we do, Karen has something to say.
Just a final thing. I think we've done a good job of flipping the script today, and just comments on, your concerns around accessing help. There is a lot of help online, so there's quite a few websites, and of course the Australian BPD Foundation have got a lot of information on there, and there's flyers down the back for you to have a look at. They've also been quite active in organising a national training strategy. So we've actually got free modules online that you can do yourself, or you can suggest to your clinicians, your GPs or your psychologists. That's free training for them to upskill themselves. And there's a national training strategy happening with some face-to-face workshops that will be occurring once COVID has been more addressed. And we've also got the national guidelines for treating BPD. This is a really useful tool for GPs, and they can be available. They are available online, and we've got copies down the back if any of you want to grab a copy and take them. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you very much for your presentation, Kimberley, so Sharon and Aaron. And we've got one here too for Dana. Now, where is that Dana woman? No, we don't. No, we don't. Will we go into? I think this is Dana. It is. This one says Tony, but it's really we'll do the switch afterwards. But all of this wouldn't have happened without this woman. There are other people named on that support list, but a mover of mountains, family. George helping as well, but the amount of work that Dana has put together to make this happen is enormous. And so, big hand to Dana. Thank you.
Thank you. Tony is actually much too kind, and this could not have happened without the support that I have from the BPD the BPD Foundation, and in particular, two very special women. Now, one I know is going to tell me off for doing this, and the other is standing here. So thank you, Karen.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you.
And thank you to Liz.
Certainly do.
There it is. So unless there's one more burning question, there's nothing else to do but to invite you to the rear of the room to partake in some delicious sangers and cakes and drinks and natter and network. So thank you very much. Thank you.
It's time to flip the script, get equipped. And the hurt, yes you heard. Don't you know that you hurt me with those words? It's time to flip the script, get equipped. And the hurt, yes you heard. Don't you know that you hurt me with those words?